America's liberty is under assault and women are rising to the defense. It's time for Ladies Can We Talk on 660 AM The Answer. Common sense talk with women and men about politics and standing up for America. With your host, nationally acclaimed speaker and author, Debbie Georgatos. Ladies Can We Talk starts now.
Hello there, and welcome back to Ladies Can We Talk. Thank you so very much for tuning in. I believe we have on our caller line Ambassador Robert Jordan. Hello, sir.
Hi, Debbie. Good to be with you.
Thank you. So nice to have you. Well, you know, I will tell you, your book, Ambassador Jordan, I want to talk with him tonight about his book, but also about his experience serving as a U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia and really going over there just right after 9/11. But backing up, I'll tell our listeners, his new book is called Desert Diplomat, Inside Saudi Arabia Following 9/11. And I will tell you, I'm sure I'll tell our listeners, it is such a pleasant read. I mean, it's just, it is, you know, it's, I don't know, it's just like, it's almost like, not like a fiction story, but it's just very readable, very friendly. So it's a great job in the tone and everything.
Thanks, Debbie. I sometimes felt like I was Forrest Gump, witnessing history, but it was quite a ride.
Well, you sure were. Well, I'm going to just tell our listeners, to start with, your time as ambassador to Saudi Arabia, you were not a career diplomat. You were a lawyer with a fabulous law firm. And so tell them, if you would, please tell us how you came to be the ambassador to Saudi Arabia with, at the time, right after 9/11, with not really a diplomatic background.
No, I had no such background at all. But the odd thing is that the Saudis will not give diplomatic credentials to a career foreign service officer to be the ambassador to Saudi Arabia. And, of course, you have to have those credentials in order to be approved to enter the country. So what they want is someone who is a close personal friend of the president, someone who can go over the heads of the bureaucracy, and someone who doesn't really have a career to protect and can speak personally for the president to the king. So that was my currency in a way. I had been George W. Bush's lawyer in some securities matters in the early 1990s. He was then elected governor. I think he thought I did a good job. We became friends. We would occasionally spend the night with him and Laura in the governor's mansion. And so when it came time that he was elected president, he asked me to serve his administration. And this was the job he selected. And so I finally decided that this was something I was willing to do.
Well, you actually committed to become the ambassador before the 9/11 attacks happened. You were in the midst of, but that had to be quite of a dropping what's that expression? Trial by fire. I mean, dropping in the middle of Saudi Arabia as a first-time diplomat right after 9/11.
It was a handful, no question about it. I had a great team around me, which I think helped me get through it. But I'll never forget, I had gone back to the White House a couple of months after I arrived there, which was, let's say, December of 2001, and went to see the president. He said, "Hey, Bob, are you having a good time out there?" And he saw the look on my face, and he knew that was not exactly the right thing to say. So he said, "Oh, well, I guess it must be a fascinating experience." And my response was, "Mr. President, I thought you were my friend. What have you done to me?"
Yes, actually, I'm laughing along with you. I read that in your book. It is a great exchange. You know, one thing I think is really good for just everyone to understand, because I think 9/11 was really a wake-up call to many Americans to try to understand better the Middle East. That it's a faraway land to most of us, and really no connection to it. But the countries have very different identities. And obviously within Islam, some of them are Sunni and some of them are Shia, and some have some mixture. But Saudi Arabia has a really unique relationship with America, because we have a diplomatic, or we have a long-term friendship really since, I guess, from FDR with Saudi Arabia in terms of political friendship. But they also have one among the most strict Islamic sects or divisions, the Wahhabis, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And this was something that really made me pause before I was willing to consider going to Saudi Arabia. Initially, it sounded like the worst idea I'd ever heard. And the more I got to understand the Saudi religious environment, the more I at least understood, I think, a little bit of where they come from. But at the same time, I had enormous concerns. The Saudis are very conservative, I guess is the best way to put it, in terms of their strain of Islam. They are not exactly like other Sunni Muslims. There are several sects of Sunni Muslims, and they're the Salafist, or what we would call here the Wahhabi sect. And it's a very puritanical version. They very much want to go back to a literal interpretation of the Quran, to the 7th century, if you will, in terms of the time of the Prophet Muhammad. And it makes it very difficult to understand a lot of what they do. But the Saudi royal family became concerned, particularly in about 1979, when there was an attack on the Grand Mosque in Mecca by some really extremist individuals that they finally put down. But part of the protest there in that attack was related to the sort of the corruption, if you will, and the secularism that they saw in the Saudi royal family. They were going off to the Riviera, to Monaco. There were a lot of princes who were kind of playboys, and they felt that they were not faithful to this strict Wahhabi interpretation of Islam. So at that point, the king decided that he needed to be, if you will, holier than the Pope. He needed to be wrapping himself in conservative Islam in order to maintain the legitimacy of the House of Saud. So from 1979 on, they delegated to the religious establishment a lot of responsibility for domestic affairs in Saudi Arabia, particularly family matters and education. And so they developed these madrasas across much of South Asia and other parts of the world. They exported this brand of Wahhabism that was very conservative. The religious establishment then gained a lot of power, and now the Saudis are trying to figure out how to put the genie back in the bottle. I think they feel they've gone probably too far. They needed to bring their population into the 21st century, but it makes it much more difficult because the religious establishment is still trying to hold them back.
Yeah, you know, Saudi Arabia is the one, maybe there are other countries, but the one country I'm most aware of that still doesn't allow women to drive. That women really are second-class citizens are in large part. Is that right?
Yeah, they're the only country in the world, I think, that doesn't allow women to drive, which is just completely absurd. And women, in our view, and I think in our interpretation, are certainly second-class citizens. But when you push on the Saudis, which I did many times, they would push back by saying, no, we actually put women on a pedestal, and because we don't have them drive, they're not subject to the advances of evil men. We put them on a pedestal. We protect them from what is sort of a Bedouin culture of not treating women with respect. So that's their argument. I think that argument is harder to maintain as time goes on. And I think the women in Saudi Arabia now very much want job opportunities. They want good educational opportunities, which frankly King Abdullah, who recently passed away, provided for them. But their family situations are still very backward, and their fathers, their husbands, their brothers are not very tolerant of what these women are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think I recall reading there's a woman doctor. I mean, women can be doctors over there, right? Because there's a woman doctor who was talking about just saying, I can do all these wonderful things she did as a doctor, but I can't drive myself to work. It's kind of, I don't know what word, otherworldly or something. Just
It's crazy. There's a good friend of mine, actually, a woman doctor who was the head of ophthalmology at one of the top hospitals in Saudi. And she was at the top of her profession, but she couldn't drive. And actually, another interesting example is Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, who is one of the richest men in the world, gives lots of opportunities to women. So his pilot of his jumbo jet is a woman. So she can fly his jet all around the world, but when she lands in Riyadh, she can't drive herself home.
Isn't that just, I mean, that irony cannot escape anyone over there, really.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I don't know if you first of all, we're speaking with Ambassador Robert Jordan, who served as United States Ambassador to Saudi Arabia for, I believe it was a little over 2 years, 2001 to 2003. It was almost 3 years.
No, that's right. Yeah, it was almost exactly 2 years.
Okay, and I want to ask you, if I can, about current, and I don't know whether this is something you've thought about or not, but I wonder, now that President Obama has really linked arms with, he seems to be sympathetic toward and helping the Shia Muslims who are in Iran, is that putting a strain, with this whole Iranian deal, is that putting a strain on the relationship between America and Saudi Arabia? And also, does that make Saudi Arabia perhaps more open to be working with Israel because they see the rise of Shia as America is helping the Iranians?
Yeah, the Saudis' worst nightmare is some grand bargain that this administration would make with Iran to allow them to change the balance of power in the Middle East. And so the Saudis are extremely concerned and quite angry at this nuclear deal with Iran. I think they view it as potentially part of a broader deal where Iran will have more leeway in subverting the Sunni monarchies in the Middle East. And so this is a great concern to them. And Israel is, in some ways, a natural ally of the Saudis in resisting Iran. There have even been rumors that the Saudis and the Israelis were talking with each other about supporting an Israeli airstrike against Iran. I don't know the truth of that. But there certainly is some logic to their common cause in that arena.
Oh, yes. That's, well, I don't know, sir. You probably have not been able to listen to this show, but we've talked at great length about the Iranian deal. We've spoken with many Middle Eastern experts on the Shia and Sunni and the different loyalties over there, what's happening with ISIS and the spread of their territory that they refer to as a mini caliphate. And so we're very tuned into all that. And I must say, I really thank you for your service. I commend you because I don't think a lot of Americans would have jumped at that job, honestly.
Well, I will tell you, when I was having a hard time deciding, my son, who was in college at the time, said to me, Dad, when your friend, the President of the United States, asks you to serve your country, you really can't say no, can you? And I think that sums it up. When you're asked to serve your country, you can't say no.
I wish more Americans felt that way. We are speaking with former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Robert Jordan, a new book, Desert Diplomat, Inside Saudi Arabia Following 9/11. And I assume, is this book available on Amazon, or tell our listeners how they can get a hold of this book?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. Barnes & Noble carries it certainly in the Dallas area and elsewhere. And it's in a second printing now, so we're having a good time with it.
Wow, second printing. When did it come out?
It came out July 1st.
Well, good for you. I love hearing that. I love it. Well, I want to thank you. Well, we're speaking with Ambassador Robert Jordan, and I thank you for calling in and really for your service. As I say, I think a lot of Americans would have said, thanks for the offer, but no thanks. I appreciate your service in Saudi Arabia. And I tell you, our listeners, this is a great book. I was reading in the airplane coming home today. Actually, we came home this morning from Greenville, South Carolina. It is easy reading and very informative. I was highlighting and underlining, and you just learn a lot in every page. So thank you for writing the book, and thank you for calling in tonight.
Good, Debbie. Thanks for having me. Take care.
You too.